What's happening, y'all? You know it is. It's your boy, Big Tank. Hey, coming at you with another Saturday live stream. We have Miss Rachel O'Leary in the Aqua shop. Y'all say hello. Say hello. All right. How you doing today, ma'am?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. No problem. Hey, it's when I say this means so much to me, and there's a lot of people I know in this chat that was looking forward to this. It just means so much to me. And I just want to thank you so very much. We're gonna go into the chat and say hello to some people, see who we got in here so far. From the beginning, Patrick Hardy, thank you for coming in first. Turn the volume down on that. Melvin, what's going on? Tank Top Tropic, Scott's Aquatics, Griffin's Fish Room. Hello, sir. Deborah Sanders, Bob Taylor. Hello. Fishy Biz Aquatics, PB Aquatics, Main Tail Furs and Fins. Miss Rachel, that would be just Main Tail Furs and Fins, and she wants me to tell you that she says hello, and she would really love to meet you. You're her idol.
Oh, that's
Muppet, Fishy Mon, Muppet 929. But yeah, she was on my stream last night, and she was like, "Oh my God, you got it." I say, "Just show up. That means you're gonna be in the house with her."
I try and be as accessible as possible. You know, I often miss a lot of messages through my social media, but my email is really easy to find. So if anyone else has like a channel and does stuff like this, the best way to get me on is to just send me an email. I am, pretty wide open as to wanting to talk about fish. It's what I've been doing my whole life, so I'm always down. You just got to catch me.
Right, right. And she means that, y'all. Be persistent, but don't be.
Well, that sounds terrible. That sounds
No, it
terrible.
doesn't. It
But
doesn't at all.
I'm a mom, and like
It
I'm
doesn't.
running a household and a fish room and a greenhouse, and I travel a lot, and so catching me is key. Not because I'm not accessible, but just because I don't really keep up with my communications as well as I should.
Yeah, and the thing is, we all have to understand. See, ma'am, I know you try to run from it, but you are special. You're special to a lot of people out here. You're special to a lot of people out here. And I mean, hey, if we that's the way we feel about you, I mean,
Well, that's very sweet.
it is what
It's
it is.
I've been doing this for a really long time, and the difference between the audience on YouTube and the comparison to the organized hobby and then back to forum days and all of that, it's also different. It's really interesting to see the communities that get built around like this particular platform. They're very supportive, and it's been really fun the past few years doing this.
Man, hey, man. Well, give them for the people who I don't know who on here don't know who she is, but for the people that's on here who don't know who you are, man, just give them a a, a small, rundown of who you are, your beginnings up to where we are today.
Well, my name is Rachel O'Leary. I am from York, Pennsylvania, which is a pretty rural area in the south central part of the state. I've been keeping fish my whole life. My dad actually did DIY stands and tank builds. We had a community aquarium with plants all the way back to when I was a child, but I didn't really get into the hobby again until after I had graduated college and started my family. At which point I got really interested in genetics of specific snails and then shrimp. And I started working with shrimp in about 2004, I think, which was very, very early on in the United States hobby. And from there, I started breeding and selling them. And then I started importing small fish. I've written a lot of papers. I've written a book. I've been a national and international lecturer for the past 14 years, I think, and an active member in aquarium societies, both regionally as well as around the country. And a huge supporter of planet aquariums, biotope aquariums, and aquascaping, as well as just fish in general.
Deal, good deal. When did you first put a aquatic animal in one of these little glass boxes?
I don't ever remember a time that we didn't have an aquarium. But the first time that I personally went out and bought supplies was in 2003.
Okay, that's a good time.
You know, I grew up on a large farm, and we always had our aquarium. And then I went to college, and I graduated college in 2000. So it was right around the same time I started my family that I started keeping aquarium fish again.
Okay, what shapes your interest in nanos? I know you have some what we would consider to be monster fish, but what shapes your interest in the nano fish?
You know, there's a few different things that made me interested. Initially, it was because the snails that I was working with had delicate antennae that most larger fish would consider worm-like and food, and that really fostered my interest in finding smaller, more peaceful species. But as my experience in the hobby grew, I came to realize that I was able to get a really cool natural behavior of smaller fish in mid-sized to large aquariums, or commonly sourced aquarium sizes, because you could keep so many more of them within that space. And watching the interaction of these fish to the environment and manipulating the environment in order to get them to breed really became super fascinating to me. So it's just opened this can of worms. And also back in the early 2000s, you know, people were keeping guppies, of course, but like nanos were joked as being feeders. So there really wasn't a whole lot of talk about them beyond being like junk fish. And a lot of exporters really considered them junk fish. And clearly that entire market has changed as things have evolved over the past 15 years. And it's been really exciting to be a part of that and watch it change, and really encourage people to think beyond small tanks, small fish, and more into creating a larger environment where you can have these really cool behaviors.
Okay. And I know a lot of people have this question just in general when it comes to using the word nano, because it gets thrown around, but some clarity. Is nano just the fish, just the container size, or can you have a 125-gallon nano tank?
Nano, when it's referring to fish, means fish under 2 inches. Generally, a nano tank is a tank 10 gallons or smaller. In my mind, the two things don't necessarily have to be combined. So, for instance, I have what I call a 75-gallon nano community, because it is a 75-gallon aquarium that is a community of nano fish. So I think a lot of those like definitions are kind of pointless beyond like your generic understanding. You know, nano is a term that was coined by someone in the aquarium industry. It's not like a rigid thing that we have to follow. So I guess it depends on if what you're researching is about nano fish or nano tanks. But for me, you know, it doesn't really matter the tank size. For me, it matters the size of the fish.
Got you. Yeah, I just needed the walls kind of broken down, you know, to free us a little bit, especially with those terms in general, because there's a lot of rigidity, you know, attached to things in this hobby that within researching, you don't really see it. You know, you're not taught it when you actually research it, but talking to people, you're vilified, you're held to a certain standard, and it's like, oh my God, well, how do I learn better? I haven't found it anywhere. And I just needed your thoughts on that, for some of the people in the chat, because I'm one of them. I love little fish. My favorite fish is the Neoheterangia elegans, tiger teddies. I love them to
Oh,
death.
tiger teddies are really cute too.
Yeah, I love them. I have a trio. I lost quite a few. I ended up with 2 males and a female, and she's about to have her first fry, and we ready to throw a party over here.
That's
But
very
yes,
cool.
I had to ask that. How are your uh I'm gonna say your big boys, your guards, your bikers? How are they doing?
They're doing great. I mean, I've had them for 15 years at this point, and they're plugging along. And eventually, someday, I'm going to build them a bigger tank. But they're doing great. They're just chilling and not really. They're interesting fish in that they don't move a whole lot, but when they move quickly. So they're super fun to watch, and they also have a ton of personality. So they beg like puppies. So whenever I walk to the fish room, they're all up at the glass begging for food like they've never been fed. But they're doing great. I've had them for a really long time. I'm super attached to them.
Okay. Yeah, because I used to see them quite a bit, and I haven't lately, so I had to ask about them.
I haven't been making a ton of content lately.
Yeah.
I've really been focusing on going outside and going out into nature and trying to look for inspiration, especially during COVID times, in the natural environments around me. Also, I don't like get rid of my fish. I keep all of my fish for their entire life. So, I have tetras that are 15 years old, and it gets maybe not for my audience, but for me, I how many times can you show the same tank? So, I try and not be too redundant on my channel with the same things all the time. I mean, I always think of new things to share, but unless it's something that I think is really useful or interesting, I'm not going to bother filming it. I'd much rather go outside and look for inspiration. I've got a few aquariums that have opened up over the past year that I want to rebuild. And I'm really looking for local inspiration, or in my travels around the country, camping, to set up sort of more inspired aquariums and be able to show people what I look for in nature in order to translate it to our aquariums and see how that benefits our fish.
Okay. And I'm really missing the plant channel.
Oh, I know. I'm slacking. I have probably 3 videos I plan to film in the next few weeks for that channel. I think really what happened with that one is over the winter, like there's, even my house plants, I mean, they do well, but there's not a whole lot to talk about when it's, the winter season with them. So now that spring is starting to hit, I'll go over the carnivorous plant spring prep. I'll go over, some of the other different projects that I do around here for the plants. But I live in Pennsylvania, and in Pennsylvania in the winter, nothing is growing. We had a lot of snow this year, and it was a really cold winter, so there wasn't a whole lot to talk about. So that one will be coming back.
Okay. Yeah, we had a Pennsylvania winter this year.
I heard. How did you fare with that? Were you good with that? Did you have pipe issues or anything like that?
I did. I say we did very well. I fell into the rolling power outages, but it was like they timed my neighborhood to the point of where when it was time to go to sleep, that's when we had the biggest gap in power being out. 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, it would come back on for like an hour, so you can get situated. Then it'd be off for maybe 3 hours somewhere. And I had no pipes to burst. And then I only went, like I said, I didn't go an extended amount of time without power, so I fared pretty well. But then there were some people who were maybe a street over from me who went like 5, 6 days without any power. And I don't know why the water went off. I mean, the water would go off too. We never lost water at all here in my house. So we fared very well, but there was a lot of hits. Oh my God, the fish. I lost a colony of endlers that I was holding on to, trying to, give it a resurgence, all gone. But that was all. I mean, that was all on my end. There was some people lost total fish rooms, everything gone. Yeah, it was a surprise. It was a surprise.
Yeah, I know. My boyfriend's first cousin, all of the pipes burst in their house. Like all their floors were ruined. They've been living out of a hotel. Like, I mean, and they're in Austin.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
They got hit really hard, and my heart goes out to all the fish keepers out there. You guys aren't really prepared for the winter weather like we are here in PA, and every time there's some sort of natural disaster that strikes, I think of the fish keepers and how helpless you must feel about caring for your aquariums in such unprecedented, weather events.
Yeah, it was one of those, like, you're just standing there looking. I saw tanks frozen, in people's houses, and I just couldn't imagine, how did your tank freeze in the house? No, we weren't prepared at all. Even though we knew it was coming, that was like, we didn't know what to do.
My buddy Luis Navarro, who used to work for ADG in Houston, I know that like their house was down in the 30s. Like they were on some unfortunate part of the grid where they didn't have power for several days. He has aquariums, he's got kids, he's got a family. And I know that ADG, Aqua Design, in Houston there, opened up their showroom and were like offering people to bring their aquariums and stuff in there just to keep things safe, which I thought was
okay.
Really
cool. Okay, I didn't even know that. That's very cool. Very cool. Yeah, we fared. We got through it. I hope that's it.
Yeah.
I had to take my daughter to work. She's a manager of a service station right down the street, and it's 5 o'clock in the morning. And I actually, those shorts, I made a short about it. Standing out there and the snow is blowing, and I'm trying to figure out how to get the ice off the windshield and drive with the door open because I couldn't see. Oh my God. I was like, where did I put those tire chains? Yeah, right. No tire chains.
Tire chains. I don't even use tire chains in PA.
Oh, hey, I was thinking of all of the cliches, stereotypes.
Yeah, I saw someone mention Goliath Farms, Charles Clapsaddle. I know they got hit really hard, and my heart goes out to them.
Yes.
Incredible hobbyist there, and an amazing contributor to our hobby. And it was really sad to see the impact of his greenhouses.
Yes, most definitely. But we must persevere. It's some things. It's in chills.
Out of our control, you just kind of got to do the best you can and go on from there.
Let's see. Natural Aquariums has a question. Are you planning on doing any travel to do some talks at local clubs? We love to see you come back to Portland to GPAS.
Well, most clubs right now are still only doing Zoom or Skype meetings, and I have to be honest, I'm not interested in doing that. For me, the best part of speaking to a club is being able to interact with all the members. And when you do the Zoom and the Skype meetings, you're talking to yourself and there's absolutely no feedback. And like for me, I have, a bunch of presentations. I have probably like 15 presentations at this point, and it's all just slides, but I completely cater my talks to the reaction and the interaction of the crowd. So until we're at a point where clubs are meeting in person, I probably won't be doing any talks for them. I am fully vaccinated, luckily. So as soon as things start to open back up and it's responsible and ethical and able for clubs to meet in person, I'll be right back in there. And Portland is actually a spot that I really want to hit again. Portland, Seattle, that whole Pacific Northwest area really is a place that I would like to be. I have a lot of friends there. There's some great nature. There's some great kayaking, canoeing, hiking, and backpacking, all of which are things that I'm super passionate about. So I can assure you that once it's feasible to do so, that will be on my to-do list. And I may even hit up that area this year, even without a speaking engagement. And should I do so, maybe there could be some way to do a social distanced outdoor meet and greet, depending on the weather, temperature, and time of year.
Okay. So when you're out there in the rough, moving around, what do you bring back, for your tanks? Or are you just more observant?
Yeah, I almost never collect from the wild, mainly because there's a lot of legality involved. Generally, when I'm out in nature like that, what I'm doing is really looking at how plants grow, how hardscape interacts, how waterways behave, where fish are, what they're doing, how they're behaving, what the substrate looks like, what the leaf litter looks like, and really just trying to see how things are in order to duplicate that more in my own aquariums, so that I can have better success with the fish that I'm raising.
So with that being said, wild caught or farm raised?
I generally prefer wild caught, and I know that's going to be controversial. Most of what I'm interested in working with is not farmed. It's just not profitable enough. There are some exceptions. Some of the small fish are being farmed at this point. A lot of the shrimp are being farmed, but with questionable quality. So for me, I generally prefer wild caught, and a lot of the areas that I get wild caught species from are not, it's not as problematic as you would think. It's really a way to be able to support the local people. It is not a huge industry in those areas. I'm sorry, my cat is just chiming in right here. So my thought process is a lot of the areas where the fish are from that I'm interested in are really prone to palm oil plantations, gold mining, and really a lot of agricultural takeover. And the only way that people can survive in those areas are if they participate in those things, unless there's an alternative. And a good alternative that helps get interest in those local waterways, as well as gives people an income, is the aquarium fish industry. So for a lot of these smaller bodies of water, if there is an interest in those fish, the people can do that and not be doing these other industries that are more harmful. And there's a lot of ethical companies out there for collection, and it can be done well. I certainly do not support a lot of the West African wild collection of fish. That is much more problematic, but a lot of the smaller waterways throughout South America, India, and Asia really need us to support them in order to preserve these species and the areas, as well as provide interest in those waterways for them to get funding.
Okay.
That might have been more of an answer than what you wanted.
No, hey. All that I can get, I am open to. Clarity. I believe in clarity and people getting all the information. I've been known to repeat the same thing,
There are tons of fish that there are absolutely no reason to wild collect. There's tons of fish that it's completely unnecessary. I fully support the CARES Preservation Program, which is a program that focuses on people reproducing these species that are in danger in the wild in captive bred programs and sharing them with other hobbyists. I fully support all of the domestic American fish farms that are putting out really great fish, but if we limited ourselves to only farmed fish, it would be a very narrow hobby. And it would do a great disservice to a lot of waterways around the world that need attention and support.
Right,
so
right.
That's where yes to both. Most of what I work with ends up being wild caught.
Gotcha. Because we'll end up with situations like I really love endlers, live bearers, but what they're running into right now, how long will we be able to even get what would be considered pure strains as opposed to the hybrids or whatever,
Right.
because I'm gonna
Yeah,
try
I
to.
mean, it's luckily there's through programs like the CARES program. It's a really great way to have a database of people that are maintaining really strict standards with keeping these fish. So the hope is that by having this database, there'll be a way for people to maintain those strains. But I think this is really important as well with things like freshwater shrimp, as well as cichlids and live bears. Cichlids definitely get the most money, attention, research, and press, but it really impacts almost all of our fish or critters.
Right. So saltwater, I haven't seen you do anything on saltwater. What is your thoughts on the saltwater side of that?
I mean, I guess I've never done saltwater. The biggest problem I have is if anyone has ever watched my channel, you may notice that I don't ever do things just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like I get interested in freshwater aquaria and I have anywhere from 60 to 150 aquariums in my basement. I get interested in, doing breeding fish outside in container ponds. And then I have a greenhouse and 20 mini ponds. I get interested in carnivorous plants. And then I go from like a couple pots of carnivorous plants to like multiple in-ground bog gardens. I get interested in house plants and I go from having a nice shelf of house plants to getting rid of our family's TV to fit a floor to ceiling rack of house plants. So the biggest problem with me is like there's a lot of really interesting stuff to do in salt water, but I think I might need a second house if I started getting into that stuff. So for now, I'm gonna try and just stick with what I'm doing. There's so much more in freshwater that I want to work with. There's so much more in house plants that I want to work with. If at any point in my life that I'm like, oh man, I really need a new challenge and a new wing to my house, I'll start saltwater.
Right.
But for now, it's just not for me because I just don't do things a little bit. Like my mind is so curious. Whenever I start a new hobby, like I just can't do like a tank or a thing. I have to go sort of hard at it, and I just don't have the space to do that for saltwater right now.
Gotcha. Because I've been hearing it came up because like the harvesting aspect. I know how the freshwater side, is farm raised. I know how they do that, but it seems extremely hard to do that with salt water. Are they all wild caught?
No, they're not. There's a lot of captive programs, but there's a lot more difficult breeding strategies, I believe, with a lot of the saltwater stuff. And I'll be the first one to ever tell you when there's an area where I have a gap in my knowledge. And I don't keep saltwater, so I am not an authority and not an expert on this. But I know that if you go to pjac.org and look there, which is the Washington-based legislative group that advocates for the aquarium as well as the entire pet industry, you can find a lot of really great information. And there's quite a few captive breeding programs as well as ethical ways of monitoring collection in order to make the saltwater side of the hobby be less detrimental to the reefs overall. again, this is not an area that I'm particularly well versed on, but I know that Amazonas Magazine puts out a lot of blogs. I know that there's a lot of really great YouTube channels that are quite reputable that'll talk about it, as well as information on that PJAC site. Should people be really concerned? I think that there's a lot of times wild caught gets such a bad reputation because the things that do get publicized are quite inflammatory. So it can be difficult to really sift through some of the bullshit in order to get to the truth. And I think that there's a lot of places doing really great programs, a lot of hobbyists working with specific species in order to make them captive bred, as well as a lot of public aquariums and masters programs that are doing really incredible research in order to provide these species as captive bred. But there's also a lot of really ethical exporters that are doing a good job, and it boils down to sort of doing your homework, spending the time, and finding out where to get your fish at the end of the day.
Okay, definitely. What do you prefer? I see, you love planted tanks. Do you prefer the man-made substrates, or are you an advocate in regards to the mud, sand cap, all of the different variations?
I never do dirted tanks. Never. Not once. Well, that's a lie. I never do that. I much prefer the simpler approach. I have absolutely no problem investing in a good quality substrate like Tropica or something like that. That is a soil-based substrate or fired clay substrate. I do not like dirted tanks, not because they're not successful, not because it's not doable, but I never leave my tanks alone. And when you plant into a dirt substrate that's capped, you have to sort of set it and forget it and let it grow. And I am not very good at not replanting, not messing around, not getting my hands in the tanks and not getting dirty.
Okay.
And when you do that, you disrupt that soil base, and it can make a real mess and really encourage algae and just turn into a bit of a nightmare. So you have to have a certain level of discipline to maintain those styles of aquariums well, and that is not me. I am entirely too hands-on with my tanks for those to work out well.
Okay. So what are your feelings on shrimp, the multicolored shrimp, your Caridina, Neo-Caridina? Where are you right now on the shrimp keeping side?
I mean, I have, oh gosh, let me visually look around in the fish room at how many species or color forms I'm working with now. Probably 8 to 10 different types that I'm still working with, some of which I've been maintaining since 2004.
Okay.
I've been working with shrimp for a really long time. And I love them. I'm not particularly fond of a lot of the hybrids. I do think it's interesting to see what people are line breeding and creating. I think it's really interesting and super important to maintain some of the wild types in their original form, although they're not as flashy, just because, again, these are species that come from like shallow mountain streams that are being destroyed. So it's in my mind, the conservation side of that outweighs the sort of fashion side. But I'll always love shrimp. I'll always keep shrimp. They just don't get as much press from me because I find there to be a great responsibility in what I promote, to make sure that what people are focusing on is ethical. And it doesn't change what other people do, but I've always been a person that very much tries to put my money where my mouth is and really broadcast things that I think are duplicable and important. And I don't want to promote bad practices. And there's plenty of really great shrimp keepers out there. There's plenty of really great shrimp exporters, but there's also a lot of really shady ones. There's been a lot of issues, specifically in the past 5 years, with disease from poor farming practices. And it's, to me, very frustrating. And until those things get addressed, you won't see me talking about it a whole lot.
Okay. This is a personal question, my own question. I have some cherry shrimp and some black diamond, but I really like, the grass shrimp, glass, ghost breeding. How or have you successfully been able to breed any of those types of shrimp, like in the home aquarium? What do I do?
And I generally think the best course of action is giving them more space than you think they need. Again, you have to remember, like, where most shrimp come from are these extremely dilute waters. And I think a lot of the regurgitated information that shows up on the internet is that shrimp do great in really small tanks. You don't really have to do water changes, blah, blah, blah. When the reality is that they come from streams most often, which have a high turnover rate and very low TDS. So the best way to get them going and doing well is to, number one, keep an extremely clean and dilute tank, and number two, make sure you're offering them nutrition that makes sense. They're grazers. They pick and graze all the time. Now, some of the things like the grass shrimp and all are more scavengers than grazers, so they have a slightly different nutritional need. But I really think that the addition of things like natural leaf litter or things like that can really go a long way into facilitating their nutritional needs, so that they can actively pick and feed all the time rather than relying on feedings. It's extremely easy to overfeed a shrimp aquarium, especially if you have a small aquarium, and get those parameters out of whack. So by utilizing natural elements, it allows them to get that nutritional composition that they need, provide cover for baby shrimp, and reduce sort of the labor load on the keeper.
Okay, so would how the water change, how frequent would you say? I know I probably need to give you a tank size more.
Yeah.
So 20 tall.
20
if it was
tall?
just for the shrimp.
I would go with a 20 long, honestly, because the bigger surface area, the more oxygen exchange and the bigger surface area. And with shrimp, that increases the amount of bio load the tank that can support. But a 20 tall is a perfectly great shrimp tank, but again, it depends on how many shrimp are in there. Is it planted? What kind of filtration are you using? I think one of the biggest problems with this hobby is that there are never cookie cutter answers to questions like that, because there's so many variables within our aquariums, between source water, feeding routine, filtration, lighting, maintenance, stocking density. Anyone who says that there is like an answer for that is just wrong. It comes down to your particular aquarium and parameters. I am very much a person that thinks you can't do too many water changes. Are they all necessary? Maybe not. But I like my water really clear. I like my tanks really clean. I like seeing things reproduce readily and bountifully. And for me, in shrimp tanks, doing weekly water changes of probably about 20%, which is on the lower end for a lot of my aquariums, is what works best for me. But again, my tap water is extremely dilute, so my TDS is like 80 out of the tap, which is fantastic. I don't have a lot of shifts in my parameters. All of my aquariums are heavily planted. So, that just maintains a level of dilution that I'm comfortable with.
Okay. Yeah, down here in Texas, especially where I am,
Probably liquid rock.
Oh, through the roof.
Yeah.
Through the roof.
Yeah, so you guys probably see, that's the other thing, that's the other funny thing about keeping shrimp, is depending on where people are and the information they're putting out depends on what they recommend. So someone maybe in your area would be like, you need RODI water for shrimp. like no matter what it is required. But here, like my tap water is essentially rainwater. You know, it is so dilute and soft. Like it doesn't matter. Like I think there's like a 10 degrees of hardness difference between rainwater, like literal captured rainwater, and my tap water. So for me, I'm like, why would I use RO? What am I stripping out? Nothing. That would be silly. So that's where it comes down to really paying attention to where your information is coming from and knowing how to apply it to your situation. And my best advice for anyone who's interested in keeping shrimp is to really just understand what your source water is, you know, your hardness, your TDS, and what you can provide, because choosing your critters based on that is going to give you a much better level of success than trying to chase a parameter that is not easy for you.
Okay. What is your favorite? I'm not gonna say right now at the moment because you know, you're in it for the long haul. What is your favorite fish? No. What is your favorite aquatic animal to keep?
My Polypterus and Lacari, one of my big boys, the saddled biker. I just love them. They're like water puppies, and despite being ambush predators, they're extremely docile. As long as the fish are bigger than their mouth, they won't even look at them. You know, they're just so fun, so neat, so prehistoric, really just fascinating from an evolutionary standpoint, and just really rewarding to keep, and especially long lived. Those guys are even written into my will. Because they live for so long that I have them written into my will, and actually approached the club that I'm a member of to make sure that should something happen to me, it's written into the bylaws that the club will be willing to help the family sort out what to do with such long-lived fish.
Okay.
Kind of a weird little
I mean,
there.
I found that to be kind of cool to even think about, because
Huh?
I've been thinking about bikers right now. Tank size, that would be an issue, but every time I go to the LFS, you know, I'm looking at them. You know, like we all get bamboozled. You have this little bitty one, you know. Hey man, this how much? $12? Oh my God, I get it. But I'm always thinking, okay, dude, you know, you right now, yes, it'll be cute in this tank over here, but how fast does it grow? Once it gets to, you know, X amount of size, what are you gonna do? You know.
Well, I mean, that's the thing with the ones that I'm talking about. They're among the larger species. So there's two main families within Polypterus. There's the upper jaw and the lower jaw. And if you look at their profile, you can see like the upper jaw protrudes in front of the lower, and the lower jaw protrudes. And generally speaking, the lower jaws get substantially larger. In most fish stores, what they're selling is the upper jaws, which is things like your Senegalis, your Nates, your Dalhousies, things like that. And for the most part, those guys all stay substantially smaller. Still big fish, but substantially smaller than the species that I work with. I have a special love affair with the lower jawed species that I cannot explain. It goes back to the days when I worked on aquatic forums, like back in the early 2000s, and I worked for Monster Fish Keepers. And there was this really cool lady on MFK named B Blondie that wrote all these really incredible publications about these fish. And I just fell in love with them before I even kept them, and I had to have them. So my fish room was actually designed around being able to keep some of these big fish. But again, they're often in LFS, the ones that you'll see the most common are the little Senegalis. And I don't recall their common name. I apologize. I'm not very good with common names, but they only get maybe, I don't know, 8 to 10 inches. So, I mean, that's still a big fish, but they're like noodles, you know, they're not. The biggest consideration with a lot of the Polypterus is making sure whatever they're in with can't fit in their mouth, and their mouth is the widest part of their body. So those guys can go in a community aquarium with more average sized fish, you know, like a 55-gallon or 75-gallon, and live well in that size aquarium. The fish that I keep cannot do that. They're in a 7-foot aquarium. Different, entirely different. It's,
And I didn't even know there was a difference like that, because what catches our eye, is we see the huge, the huge bikers in the tank, definitely looking like dinosaurs, and that's what sticks out. And that's what's always in my mind, the upper jaw, lower jaw deal. I'm gonna have to really, really get into that. I didn't even
yeah,
know that was a theme.
yeah. There's quite a few species that are much more um, attainable tank size, like the kind of tank that you can buy at your fish store size. Now, Ornatopenis or Nates, I believe, are the largest of the upper jaw species. Those guys get to like 20 inches. So those aren't good for the smaller tanks, but most of the other upper jaw species, and again, that's most often what you see in your fish store, can do fine, but you really have to think about what you're putting them with, because they're piscivores. They're going to eat other fish. If they can fit in their mouth, they're going to eat them. And the other thing is that they're extremely strong and really good escape artists. So you need to make sure you have really good, tight fitting lids. And that includes gaps around filtration, or they will find a way out of your aquarium, because they gulp surface air.
Okay.
So they need that space for the surface air. They need that humidity, and you need to make sure that they're not, as they're going up to gulp air, getting out of your aquarium.
Gotcha. So do you do any type of seal per se? Because like when I have my betta fry, you have the seal on top to keep the
That humid layer.
the warm humid water. Do you do that for your biker?
I have my glass lids are probably about a quarter of an inch thick, maybe a little bit, maybe 3/8. They're custom lids that were made for the aquarium. I had them made at an auto glass shop. And I keep the water line dropped about this far, and between the tight fitting lids that are completely sealed and that small couple inch gap of air, it retains a lot of humidity right at that water surface. Now they have a divided lung, so they can actually breathe surface air and underwater. They just generally come up to the surface, so they're not quite as picky as the anabatenoids, but still it's a consideration that you need to make. If you have your water right up to the lids, they're not going to do well, and they're going to be smashing your lids.
Okay. Speaking of anabantoids, what do you think about wild bettas? I have some chinoides right here.
Ooh, they're sexy.
They come in a close second behind.
Sexy pieces of fish.
Yes, come in close behind my tiger teddies, but I got a pair right over here.
They're behind your tiger teddies?
Yeah,
snake bettas are behind your tiger teddies?
I mean,
Damn, you are a nerd.
Yeah.
No, I love wild bettas. I'm not as big of a fan as the domestic bettas. I really, really, really love my wild bettas. Oh, just wait until they fire up in breeding dress. You're gonna you're gonna geek, man. You're gonna geek. I love wild bettas. I have quite a few. Well, not quite a few. Right now, I only have maybe three wild betta tanks in my fish room. I love them. There's a lot of different breeding strategies within that family as well. You've got bubble nesters or mouth brooders. Yeah. So depending on what you want to do. And then there's ones that do well in harems. There's ones that are better in pairs. There are ones that are good for communities. When you start looking into the wild bettas and the other labyrinth fish, it's a slippery slope because there's so many different interesting species, and especially ones that really need our attention and honestly the press to preserve their waterways, specifically things like licorice gouramis. So there's an entire database called the Paris Forminas Project that you can look at to find who is captive breeding those licorice gourami, which again are not bettas, but it's sort of the same style of keeping for the most part. And a lot of those fish really need our help as well. And you can find breeders. It's an international organization, so you can find breeders within your country to be able to keep those fish, or just get better information so that if you do get them in, you can keep them more ethically and responsibly. and
Right.
hopefully have spawning success.
Yeah, I like Anabantois quite big. I have sparkling gouramis also.
Oh,
Uh,
those are great.
Same spirit
Do
kind
you
of
hear them
fish.
croaking?
Yes, and it was the first time I did. I was looking around. I was thinking it was it was a hang on the back at one point. And I'm just looking around, and no, it was it was my fish.
Yeah, it's great. They have a modified I can't remember if it's their pelvic girdle that's modified that makes them able to make that sound, but it's pretty cool, isn't it?
And it's pretty loud. I mean, you could not imagine. Oh,
Surprisingly loud.
Ames, what kind of Ames tiger teddies are Neo Heterangia formosa. Just look that name up. You'll go out and get you some. No, elegans. My fault. Neo
Yeah, I was gonna
Heterangia
say they're not Formosa,
elegans.
but I wasn't gonna correct
Yeah,
you on
no,
your own
no,
channel.
no, no. I have Heterangia formosa also right down here behind me, but no,
Yeah, the
they're
least
they're not.
killies.
Yeah,
I
they're
have
not
those
the
as well.
same. They're not the same.
The teddies are cuter.
Yeah.
They're very similar, but the teddies have like a nicer patterning, I think.
Yes, and the bronze with the pattern and the little gold spot in the middle of there's just something about that. And
I
I,
agree.
I am I am kind of a nerd, man. I'm not. A lot of people, especially when I started out, you know, they were expecting the, run of the mill type of, and I just always drew to this one tank dedicated to this one specific type, you know, of fish that I probably couldn't sell it. I couldn't sell it to anybody that I knew because they don't know anything about them. I just like to keep them. You know what I'm saying? That type of thing. I was like, no, I'm not really in it for making money. I just like, you know, specialty type of fish like that
Well,
I don't see everywhere.
on that note, that is probably the biggest argument for people to become involved in local aquarium societies, because it's all well and good to keep like the fish that everybody wants. They're easy to sell on the internet or sell to your store. But the best way to share your fish that are maybe a little less flashy, but equally or more important, more interesting in my mind, a lot of the times, is to be a part of a local aquarium society. And I realize not everyone lives in an area where they are, but I think a lot of you would be surprised at how many fish clubs are out there, and generally within an hour or two of where you live. A lot of them have annual auctions. A lot of them have annual events where you can go see speakers. But most importantly for me, it's been an especially important part of my life to go and just be able to like talk with other people that get it. It's great to have this online community, but there's something really magical about going to hang out with a bunch of other people that are just super excited about fish. So if you ever have the opportunity, I really encourage you to check out your local aquarium societies.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to find me one. For me to be right here on the edge of Houston, a city this large, there's like a beta group. That's it. Like I'd have to start something myself because there's nothing.
Well, in Houston,
There's
there's
nothing.
Houston Fish Box, or
Well,
there's an aquatic plant one that's located. I can send you some links
well,
because I've
please
done group
do.
buys for them. They've done group buys with
Okay,
me. I'll send you
okay,
some
because
links. That's what I'm
yeah, I haven't
saying.
been able
Like
to find
sometimes you have to
anything.
dig a little hard, but they exist.
Okay, okay.
They're almost everywhere.
Well, please, because ah,
Yeah,
I'm
I'll help you
for
out,
for
bro.
my thank you because for my interest, lies. It's like I'm stuck. I'm like the only person over in this little bitty 8x5 room with these 11 tanks. And they're like, well, what do you have? And then I tell them, and they're looking at me like,
And
I,
a lot of these aquarium societies, I mean, Facebook, I know, is not everyone's most favorite platform, but most of the aquarium societies have Facebook pages too, which can be a really great way to reach out to your local network as well. So just the thing to do, like, especially if you're doing a really great job with your fish and they're breeding. I mean, the reality of fish keeping is if they're doing well, they're going to be breeding. So you have to have sort of something to do with the offspring. So
right,
local clubs are great for that.
okay. Ames spirit fish. wanted you to please speak of snails. What is you want to know about snails, Ames?
What? I'm not sure what I'm supposed to address about snails. I love them.
Yeah,
I have one tattooed on my arm right here.
Yeah, I don't know. You just said please speak of snails.
I have a lot of videos about snails. If you go to my channel and just search the channel for snail, there's species spotlights, there's stuff about common snails, there's stuff about breeding snails. There's a lot of information on my channel about snails. They were my #1 love affair back in the day. So
maybe that's what maybe since he knew that, because he says yes right here with 3 S's. Hey man, Jeffrey Watts. Hey man, Fish Diva, how you doing, man? I didn't see you in here. Rob93, how you doing? Hey everybody that came in. Better late than never. I'm not mad at you.
And a big thanks to Kaler's Aquatics there. They're doing a great job in the chat. Thank you, Bob.
Bobo.
Yes.
I think Bob is my grandfather.
Oh, and Chevy Fish is in there. I say a lot of familiar names. Thanks, guys. I appreciate the support of both me and Hank here.
Yeah, when I say they've shown me so much love. Rob93 there was the second live stream before I started doing any live streaming myself. He had me come up on a live stream. An individual by the name of Nathan, God rest his soul. He was what was Nathan's take? His child name. Come on, y'all. Somebody put it in the chat. Because I done forgot and I should remember it. But he called me up out his chat and just had, just interviewed me. I'm just sitting in the chat. I don't know if it was something about the name that's, stuck out of Sand Creek. There you go. Thank you, Mad Fish Diva. I should have remembered that. But he just called me up, and asked me questions, and we connected. And I'm not the big video guy, like just making the videos, the instructional videos, not really me. 2 o'clock in the morning, I get inspiration, I build something, don't record it, and then I might tell them about it later on. But I'm all about the, the human interaction. So when I started doing the live streams, and connecting and bonding with people that was just my thing.
I really miss doing it, especially since COVID, because my kids were doing cyber school. My internet could not support it. One of the reasons I could do this today, and the one that I did recently with Joey and Sean on Pet Tech, was because my kids were gone. So nobody else was using my internet, because where I live, it's so rural here. The internet speeds are horrendous. And I can't maintain a stream. For a while during COVID, I was trying to do it weekly just so that I could have this connection with my fellow fish keepers, but my stream just kept dropping out, and it was so frustrating, and I really miss it. And that's something I'd like to get back to. I really enjoy streaming. I really enjoy the live format. I've seen a few people go through the chat there, my buddy Renee as well. It's like seeing old friends when you do a live stream, and I've really missed it. But every time the last 5 times I tried to stream on my own channel, would just disconnect, and then I had to restart a stream, and I just got super frustrated and said, screw it.
I hear you.
Went out paddling instead. But I should really get back to doing more streams, because I agree with you. I mean, this is a great way to interact with people and hang out with your friends. I think it's amazing, and I'd really like to do more of it, which is why I've made these podcasts and visiting streams like yours a priority recently. It's been really nice for me to be around fellow fish keepers again.
Man, we appreciate it, because I can't convince the people here in my house to be fellow fish keepers, so I have to have somebody.
Yeah, well, tell me about it. I understand that one.
Indoor fishing inside started a infusorial culture. You think? Any tips on keeping the culture going? And Big Tank Hank, is dehydrated vegetables good to feed your culture? I mean, it's vegetables. You can use it, but you're gonna have to boil them to break them down so you can start the process of them being broken down by bacteria, which the infusoria, are basically that. But just putting the vegetable in there as it is in that frozen form, just thaw it out, is not going to do it. You have to start the breaking down process so the infusoria can actually feed on it. I keep infusoria going just in my tanks with my leaf cover and things like that. I just have it in there.
So, fun nerd fact for you is that if you work with mystery snails are Pomatia diffusa, formerly Pomatia burgessii, used to be called infusoria snails, and that's because mystery snails specifically they're herbivores, so they eat a lot of vegetable matter or whatever you feed them. They have a really inefficient digestive tract, so they eat all the time, but they poop all the time, but the food is only partially digested. So as they crap out this partially digested vegetable matter, it is stuck in their slime and produces infusoria within your aquarium. So a pro tip for you is if you're working with these snails and you travel like I do, you throw mystery snails in your fry tanks and there's stuff for the snails to eat, they will continuously feed your aquarium infusoria for you. And there's a lot of really cool old scientific journal articles about those snails, calling them infusoria snails.
Okay.
Nerd tips.
Hey, thank you. Aha. I like that. I really do. When I first started out, when I had Splendens, I'd have fry, show up out of nowhere. My better fry that I thought, were gone. Just show up 1, 2, 3. Oh my God, where are you coming from? Because of the infusoria that I left in there. I mean, they were braving guppies and everything and made their way through.
The other thing you can do is just like keep a vase of dechlorinated water and some crushed greens in a windowsill and just swap out the water every few days. And if you look at it with a flashlight, you'll see the little infusoria swimming around. Now it will get funky and it will get a skin on the top. So you need to like swap out the water, but you just like bruise some leafy greens and put them in water and sunlight and infusoria just grows.
Right.
And you can take a pipette and then feed that to fry tanks as well.
Yeah, I tell them, my wife will ask me, why do you have this in this window smelling like this? I say, wait. I say, you see that cloud moving in there?
Exactly.
I say, that's why I have it.
Exactly.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Hey, we kindred spirits over here. See, that's what I'm talking about. That's the connection. That's the connection that I'm talking about. That's why I call people up on it, because if I feel it, and I believe it. I believe it. Hey, this is a person right here, your energies are matching. Talk to them, bring them up, talk to them, see what they're all about, and it's never let me down. It's never let me down. Ma'am, we hit the hour mark. I almost hate, to shut this down, but my son has to get to work.
Those kids.
Yes. My daughter went before I started the stream, and he has to go in. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on and being persistent through ski season. I have to tell you guys, he tried to get me on and I was like, yes, I'm there. And then I had the opportunity to go cross country skiing and I was like, sorry, dude, you only get so much snow in PA. I'm out of here. And I'm thankful that you stuck with it and this worked out so well. And thanks so much to your audience for joining us and all of my friends that were in the chat as well.
Yes, ma'am. I believed it. Yes, thank y'all for coming through. Thank y'all very, very much. For spending this time with me. You didn't have to do it, but you did. I thank y'all very much. And thank y'all again for me hitting 1,000 on last week. Thank you very much. Hey, now play them videos so I can get my watch hours. But thank you, ma'am. We're gonna shut it down. Y'all be good. Love each other and take care of those fish. We out.